Welcome to One Up Fantasy, helping you one up the fantasy football competition. For the latest in Chicago sports news, visit ChiCitySports.com. And now, here are the hosts of One Up Fantasy, Stephen Johnson and Chris Jackle. Kaboom!
What is up, One Up crew? Welcome into another episode of One Up Fantasy here on ChiCitySports.com and the Tape Never Lies Network. I'm Stephen Johnson. He is Chris Jackle, back after a little hiatus. May or may not have fallen asleep in a toddler's room. Get a child to sleep, but hey, it happens to all the dads out there at some point.
I like you driving over yourself instead of me having to do it, Mr. Johnson.
You know, I'll take blame where blame is due. So I'll roll into it, but nevertheless, we're here. It is always fantasy season, always time to talk regardless of what season it may be. Obviously, Dynasty never sleeps, and redraft maybe not either. We'll talk about some quarterback rankings, top 10 QBs heading into 2022 in redraft, as well as some of the rookie class. I could call it a little undervalued this year compared to years past. Really isn't a clear-cut number one quarterback in the 2022 class, which, if you're holding on to those first-round dynasty picks, may or may not be a good thing, depending on how deep your league goes. But before we get into all of that, also going to talk about some of the playoff implications that may play into the rankings in 2022, as there have been some dynamite performances so far in the first two rounds. I mean, probably, I don't know about you, but one of the craziest, if not the craziest, playoff rounds I can remember ever, just from
greatest weekend of football.
It
greatest
might
weekend
have
of
been.
football. That's it. I mean, it was just Saturday and Sunday. It was, first off, you got to watch the Packers get their dicks kicked in Saturday night, and it was just glorious, right? Oh yeah, I watched with my brother-in-law, a Packers fan. And watching him melt into the couch and then just storm off into a bedroom because he was so, it was just, it was wonderful. You take little victories when you're a Bears fan right now, because there aren't many. We had a major one today, but it's,
absolutely.
Hey, but back to football. I mean, it was amazing. Or this past weekend's football schedule was unreal. Sunday night's game, I couldn't fall asleep. I was so excited, but there were guys that just stepped up and did their thing on Sunday night. Gabe Davis was just going to earn some money, I think, after that game. But yeah, holy shit. I think Blake Bortles is going to join the crew too, over in Buffalo, and back up Mitch, who's backing up Josh Allen. I know Shane wants to know that. So,
we'll just rewind it a couple of years back.
What'd you think? I mean, this past weekend, were you surprised by any of those games?
I tell you, really, I think the only one I can say I was really surprised by was that Packers-Niners game. I mean, it turned into just like this drudge, and there was all this talk about, it's going to be, cold. It's going to be your classic Lambeau frozen tundra game. And by all accounts, it was that frozen tundra game, but to the point where it's like Aaron Rodgers wanted nothing to do with any of his teammates that weren't named Devontae Adams or Aaron Jones. You look at that stat line and you're like, he had 2 completions to guys not named Aaron Jones or Devontae Adams. It's like he almost sabotaged the team himself, and it was glorious. That the thing that bothered the Packers all year long in their special teams is what came back to bite them in the ass, and I loved every second of it. And the fact that Robbie Gould was the one to put him away, and then to listen to Jimmy G, who grew up a Bears fan, and Robbie Gould, a Bears legend, after the game, go and say, fuck the Packers.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful end of the evening. I loved it. It was great. been a good week so far, too. The Bears
It
have a
has been.
GM. The Bears have a GM, too. Happy.
In polls we trust, right? There we go. You got to get
Another Ryan P.
Hey, RP, whatever. Second time's a charm, here we are. But, and I think just back to that Packers game, and speaking of fantasy implications, and I was in a playoff blitz, and I picked A.J. Dillon for that game. And I think, with him getting hurt, it just goes to show, I think if he was there, it would have been a much different ball game, But and Aaron Rodgers threw one pass to somebody not named Devontae Adams in the second half. I think it was that ball that Mercedes Lewis or whoever fumbled in the second half there. But outside of that, I think that's what I had read. I was like, Jesus Christ, But hey, sounds like he's on his way out. So fuck him and and the horse he came in on. So here we are. It's fantasy talk, though, right? Like, I think that's, these guys aren't here to hear us talk about the fucking games. But, there is some fantasy talk or implications with those games that we've all were witness to this past weekend. And so I didn't know if you wanted to start there. What were your thoughts, Mr. Johnson?
Let's start there. Let's dive into a little bit, really kind of the surprising nature of how the playoffs have gone through these first two games, specifically the running games of every single team. We're talking 14 teams in the NFL playoffs. It's been trash. The running games have been trash through two straight weeks. I don't know. Do you have stats up right now? I want you to hold off if you don't.
Go ahead.
Who do you believe is the leading?
I know this already
rusher?
because
you
I
know
heard
it already.
But
okay,
Patrick
do you
Mahomes.
Know how?
No.
But do you know how many yards the leading rusher in the NFL postseason is? How many they have and who they are at this point?
This past weekend. I apologize. He was a leading rusher for this past weekend. So
correct, 98 yards.
Yeah. Shit. I want to say
yards and who it is.
Joe Mixon.
Close. He is sixth, but he only
God.
has 100. He only has 102 yards rushing.
What?
That's
all
it.
Right. I'm gonna waste your time here because I'm at a loss.
Okay, fair enough. Elijah Mitchell with 149 yards is the leading rusher in the postseason thus far through 2 weeks. 149 yards. We have not seen a significant at all. We have not seen a 100-yard rushing game in the postseason.
Holy cow!
Think about that. Through 7 games.
Yeah. And the guy that almost got it was Mahomes last week with 98. I mean, that's fascinating, and so defensive schemes change. They make adjustments. They, the weather related, you'd think like the snow and the weather that we had this past weekend would have been, would have benefited the run. But
right,
it just goes to show the Niners stepped up and did the thing that they had to do to stop the Packers, run game. But I don't know what if you had to put your finger on it. I'm not here for the analysis. This is your job. You're the numbers guy. So what do you think?
What we're both here for.
But you know what I'm saying. You're the golden voice, and I need to hear it here. So.
I mean, it's odd because you just look at the list of players that are here. Again, Elijah Mitchell, 149 yards. Josh Allen, 134 yards. Deebo Samuel, 111. Devin Singletary, 107. Cam Akers, 103. Joe Mixon, 102. Those are the 6 players with at least 100 rushing yards through 2 games in the postseason. I mean, really, you look at this and you kind of scratch your head and wonder what is it? And, there's always been the talk. It's a passing league. It's evolved. It's got everything going on, but you'd think there'd be at least one. Like Derrick Henry got bottled up in Tennessee's loss. Dante Foreman actually had more yards than Derrick Henry in that game. And so you go up and down the list here. One guy, I think, if anybody, who's helped their draft stock in regards to rushing next year, and he's going to be a late round grab because, I mean, he could stay with the team he's currently with. He could go somewhere else to help them. And he was a hot commodity a couple of years ago when he landed in San Francisco after spending a couple of years to start his career with the Minnesota Vikings. And that's Jerick McKinnon. Yes. With the Kansas City Chiefs, who has finally had an opportunity to show off the athleticism. I feel like he's been in the league 10 years. At this point, it seems like he has. I feel like 4 of them he was injured in San Francisco. But really, aside from him, I struggle to find another running back that says, man, he's really doing himself a favor here walking into next year. And that's still what could potentially be a fringe guy, if not maybe even a draftable guy, depending on how deep your rosters go and where he lands. And there's just nothing else here. Cam Akers, two lost fumbles,
2 huge fumbles.
He almost lost the Buccaneers. I mean, the Buccaneers had that on a silver platter.
Should have. Yeah.
Man, I mean,
Devin Singletary, he's a guy that I think, he's an underrated guy. I feel that, with respects to Dayball utilizing him. And I know that we've talked about it on, on TTNL at length, and I saw a lot of Twitter about the Dayball love, but they were 6th this year in rushing yards a game, which I think was like 129.9. Devin Singletary had a quiet but solid year, for the fantasy owners that did have him, and he has 107 rushing yards this fantasy season, this football or playoff fantasy season. At the same time, it was 2 games. He's a dude that I think his draft stock's going to stay where we're at. But he has that potential. Machine, yeah, he is. But if Zach Moss, I don't think he's the guy. I don't think he's the dude they thought was going to take over for Devin, or be that nice compliment. And I'm wondering if he becomes more of the, the ball carrier there and takes more of a lead and gets more touches. If that's the case, he's another guy that I think that going into next year, he could jump up a couple of spots. I'm not saying he's going to have a monster leap, but, I think there's a chance that you may see Devin, instead of maybe moving up around, what do you think? Like a 4th round possibly at this point, instead of a 5th round pick on him?
Yeah, I mean, right now, here, see where, I don't know if you had the, pulling him up. He's currently running back 37, so 101st overall is Devin Singletary. That feels low. It really does feel low, given the fact. I mean, I will admit, it slipped my mind just how good he was playing to close out the year. I mean, you look at these touchdowns, and he was just stacking them up. I mean, he had 3 postseason touchdowns. He had 7 during the regular season, including 5 in the last 4 weeks. It's weird because Zach Moss was a year ago the guy that everybody was saying, here's the big bad running back that's going to lead the Bills backfield, and now he's not even in the top 50 in players in the postseason in rushing yardage, and bottom of that list is like 5 yards. So I mean, that right there tells you just how much of an impact he's probably going to have heading into next year. And you know what? I agree with you. I'm shocked that he's that low right now, that he's 101st overall. I feel like this is a guy potentially, depending on if they bring in some added competition, which, I mean, let him run. I mean, he proved that he could get it done.
Yeah,
absolutely proved that he could get it done. Like a 6th, 7th rounder, I'd say that's where I'd probably be comfortable because, for as many Bears fans that want Brian Daboll in Chicago, he doesn't rely on the run, specifically with his running backs, as often as I think a lot of fantasy players wish he did. Right. Honestly, you could even point to Sunday as being one of those situations in which, Singletary only had 10 carries.
I know.
He did score, but he only had 10 carries. And so it's one of those things where you go, okay, just how trustworthy can this guy be? I think that's the biggest concern I have, is that, we might kind of see what, almost we saw with Matt Nagy in the running game where he kind of abandoned it at times, and then you're left thinking, okay, well, I only need 4 points. Okay, he didn't score any more points. Why didn't he carry the ball again?
I just look at the names around him and I'm surprised. The one guy that it stands out to me is Rashad Penny, with like neck and neck with Singletary, and he's a guy that we talked about during the end of the season, championship week and the whole nine, is who he won people money, including myself, and I'm grateful for that. But, depending on the situation, he's a free agent. He may be a guy that I think he said he wants to stick with Seattle. They could end up with a shit situation at quarterback if Russ ends, if Mr.
Absolutely.
Unlimited decides to get out of there. Maybe they swap quarterbacks and the Tannehill goes out to fucking Seattle and they work out a deal or something, and he gets some sort of quarterback play. But obviously your running game is dependent on decent quarterback play. So if they're hurt there, then maybe I sound like a dumbass saying that, but I think to the point of good quarterback play with Rashad Penny staying in Seattle, he's another guy that if he gets a little bit of money and they say they're going to lean on him to start the season, his draft stock's going to increase too. Granted there wasn't a playoff push there, but and that's not the purpose of what we're talking about. But I just look at that comparison, and it is interesting. But you break it down in the way that Penny finished the season and the way Singletary was throughout the year, it's a pretty solid parallel. So I can see where so Singletary's probably ranked where he should be right now, but if they make that commitment to the run, like we talked about, yeah, he definitely should jump up.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd be shocked if he doesn't. I mean, there's even some other names that I'm looking at here that are ahead of him where I'm thinking, how the hell is this even like Darrell Henderson's 100 right now. He's gonna have Darrell Henderson. I think we'd both say, Henderson or Singletary. Take Singletary all day, obviously, unless Cam Akers continues to put the ball on the ground. Then maybe we talk about it, but no, not right now. But yeah, it seems like the arrow is pointing up, and I'm surprised there hasn't been that immediate sting yet to kind of vault him up boards, because aside from the running back situation and the fact that it's been rather lackluster in terms of the productivity, wide receivers on the other hand, that's night and day. to what we've seen. Let's keep it in Buffalo from that end of things. Gabe Davis, my man, just killing it. An NFL record, 4 touchdowns and over 200 yards. Just a phenomenal game. And this is the second consecutive year that he has just come on and exploded at the end of the season. You think, okay, is this a guy that could potentially get that breakout finally? You got ancients in Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley. Is next year, 2022, the year that Davis finally busts through as that bona fide second option behind Stephon Diggs, who in all actuality had a pretty damn quiet game on Sunday. There really wasn't that burst out player that we had seen him be this year, last year with Buffalo. And here we are. I'm going to search him up here. Gabriel Davis, probably should have done it before. Wide receiver 44, 105th overall. He's got to be shooting up those draft boards too when it's all said and done. I don't know if there's a delay in the ranking situation here, but my God,
his seasons were almost identical. 2020 and 2021. He played all the game. Played 16 games, 35 receptions, targeted 62 times in 2020, 63 times this year, 599 for receiving yards last year, 549 this year. 7 touchdowns last year, 6 touchdowns this year. And then he had 200 plus in one game, had half the amount of receiving yards in one game this year. I think he has 242 receiving yards in the playoffs, this year, and second in receiving yards for, wide receivers right behind Cooper Kupp, due to that Hail Mary bullshit that with the broken coverage against Tampa sealed that deal for those stats there. But man, I still feel bad for Brady on that one. I still can't get over it. But I was really surprised Sunday. I mean, he's got the skills. He showed it. You said it last year. He demonstrated the ability to break out, and it just also speaks to the weapons in Buffalo that, they have guys that can make plays, and at any given day, it's, whether it's Singletary, whether it's Gabe Davis, whether it's Diggs, whether it's Beasley, and there's another receiver that I'm alluding. He's a young guy. Who's their wide receiver for? Come on, help me out.
Yeah, spot here.
I thought you knew it, but then they got Knox at tight end. So they got guys, I'll move right on, but they got Knox at tight end. And they got guys that can make plays. So it hurts at times to be that loaded. It's like with the Chiefs. There's one guy that you never know who's going to go off, but they got 5 or 6 guys that just could, because of that offense and that potential. It's like Pringle going off, when you're like, I put all my money on fucking, Hardman or whoever, so it's like a damn prop bet. I didn't do that. No, not me. But Gabe, you're right. I think I don't know if he's a free agent. I thought for some reason that I read somewhere that his contract was up.
So he'll be entering year 3.
You're right. So he's still under his rookie deal.
Yeah. So he will be 23 next year. So I mean, still a youngin, by all means. And again, there's a lot of that talk about that third year wide receiver. There's been the arguments about year 2 is the one where things really get rolling for wide receivers. But I think just the fact that the room is so crowded, and the fact that there just really hasn't been that situation where they've had to rely on him heavily, obviously outside of Sunday with just the explosion that occurred. Here we are with, again, a budding young wide receiver, 2 years left on a rookie deal. And I mean, I'm trying to think of what would be a healthy floor at this point. If the floor is, what he's essentially done, like you mentioned, identical stats the last 2 years, or if we're talking about something more in the lines of expecting him to at least break, say, 900 yards and 8 touchdowns next year, which I think is definitely within the realm of possibility, given the fact he's gotten the run that he has in his first 2 years in the league.
It's a great point, Stephen. I like Davis in a redraft league, but dynasty wise, I think he's a guy you could look to sell right now. I think take advantage of the hype, that big game. And, I have him out floated right now, one of my dynasty leagues. I did get a 2nd round pick offer back. I declined it, hoping to maybe get a player instead or whatever, just trying to see. But, I am hurting in receiver, but I think I can upgrade, take advantage of the hype with him and get someone I just feel a little bit more comfortable. And I bring that up because as we talk about this, one of the players that this guy, I just got a call before we came on. I was listening to the Sick podcast with Rank and Phil. And this dude called me and he wants Mooney from me in my dynasty league. And so I'm going to take a peek and see what I can do to make some moves. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. And in Mooney this year, I think they need to go out and get somebody to really give Fields a real option at wide receiver 1, to complement David Montgomery. I don't see him as a wide receiver 1, but I picked him up and he just sat on my bench towards the end of the season. And I started playing him and now people want him. And so, what are your thoughts? What do you think he's worth?
Mooney?
Yeah, just for shits and giggles as we sit here and pontificate.
I mean, at this point, you're talking about 1,000-yard wide receiver. It's a lot easier to obtain that with the 17 offense too, season. Right? Yeah, man. I want to say I'd let him go for like a late first. I don't think a lot of fantasy players are willing to necessarily give up a late first, that being the issue, because I think
he's loaded with draft picks. I'll say that he is a guy that accumulated a ton of draft picks this year. But he did that by depleting his roster, right? And he ended up, I think he came in 2nd in the dynasty league because he has a fucking sick ass. He's got a great team, but he's thin at wide receiver. And I'm like, you know what? I might be able to take advantage of him here and do a little rebuild, because I traded my 1st round pick in this upcoming draft in a big deal because I got Kamara and DeAndre Hopkins and somebody else for Jamar Chase, which wasn't, and I did something nonetheless. I kind of mortgaged everything, so I'm trying to rework it and get back into the first. I'm looking like Ryan Poles here, trying to pull off a deal. But I was just curious, it dawned on me as we're talking about it. So you're thinking a late round first? I could probably get for Mooney.
Yeah, I think so. But it's tough because I think to an extent I'd almost rather get, and this plays the patient card here, because I'd rather get a 2023 first and maybe a little opportunity to be a little bit higher up the draft board than a late 2022, just because the depth of this class just isn't here.
You like the segue.
I do also believe that something tells me the Bears are going to focus on supporting the wide receiver position via the draft.
Devontae
and I don't think they're going to go big in free agency. I think
fuck you, Steven.
I hate saying it.
I hate saying it right now.
I know. I apologize. However,
fuck off. I'm kidding. I love you.
I do believe that the Bears are more well equipped to shore up the offensive line, to shore up the secondary, as well as a second linebacker that isn't on 1 foot in the grave, Danny Trevathan, to put out there with Roquan Smith, to use the salary cap in that regard. And then towards the draft, look at guys like Alec Pierce with Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Trying to think of some of the other guys that are out there that I
wide
like.
receiver?
Justin Ross out of Clemson, I think, is another one. So, I mean, there's some second round guys that should be there for the Bears, and maybe they even go back to back wide receiver picks in the second and third round if they do shore up enough via free agency. I can't fathom spending a lot of money on Chris Godwin coming off major knee surgery, Devontae
but
Adams.
ACLs aren't that bad now, man. I feel that you could get like an Allen Robinson coming off, he's going to get his bag, but you may be able to get him on the cheap. I don't want to say the cheap, but, maybe get him on somewhat of a discount, similar to the AR deal where they put the faith in you on the long-term side, maybe not as much guaranteed money, but put those accelerators in there and those incentives. I wouldn't mind taking a risk on a guy like Godwin. He's still young. He's not, pushing late 30, or, late 20s. I believe he's 27. I could be wrong.
Something
but
like that. I think you're right.
And, if they could land somebody, obviously they played the game, and Shane brings it up great with the whole AR thing last year where they played it with Galladay and brought him out to dinner and offered him that deal, and A-Rod, next thing you know, his agent calls and he signs that tender. The Bears know they need a wide receiver, and it showed last year. They tried to bring in, they tried to do something, didn't work out. I would love to see them bring somebody in. Obviously my nocturnal emission would be Devontae Adams. But, at the same time, I would not be disappointed with Godwin, but you're right. There are some rookies out there. I think there are some sleeper rookies at wide receiver.
There are
that you could definitely benefit from in your dynasties, your dynasty leagues, where you could slow play some shit and end up looking sweet, some tier 2 guys, the Pinkens, the Robinsons, Dotsons, those dudes, man. I'm telling you, there's some guys. And I don't know if you want to get into dynasty or like rookies, or do you want to talk about a couple more players, fantasy performers over the playoffs? What do you want to do?
I think we can get into some dynasty. We can pivot that route, and then we can go.
Yeah, I know Bob here was asking about running backs. Do you want to start there? Do you want to go to quarterbacks? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Let's talk running backs.
Okay.
With what we got going on here.
There's a couple of good ones, right?
There are. There's been a lot of back and forth about who the number one guy really is. I think it's starting to lean more to Breece Hall with Iowa State.
Over Spiller.
Spiller. Yeah. I mean, you have Kenneth Walker that's lurking there in the wings, where you're like, okay,
is he?
Though. I don't mind the 1-year wonder situation with the running backs as much as I do with wide receivers, where you get one
Okay.
guy that like has
Kevin
the one
White's, if
big
you
year.
will.
I wasn't going to say it because it just pains me every time I hear
I have
that
his
name.
jersey literally right up above me in the closet. In the room above this room I'm in. There's a Kevin White jersey that's literally got dust on it from like 2017 because it's still on the fucking hanger. But anyway, I digress. Sorry, that just brings back bad memories.
It's
We had Amari Cooper.
There are some very intriguing names here, especially when you look at Spiller, just the size that he is. 6'1", 225, like
beast.
That's a big beastie dude. And then you have guys like even
they're
the
both similar.
4.
Hall and Spiller are close in size. Sorry, Stephen, just to interject. I think
you're right.
They average 6'1", 215 together. So it's like, those dudes. I don't think you can go wrong with either. If you get stuck, from a little bit from A or B there, either option I think will work out well for you. But as we talk about, fit is really important. And granted, most of these guys are probably going to go. Maybe 2 of these guys will go in the first round. Do you think all 3 go?
Oh, I'd be shocked, honestly, if one goes.
I think Walker's going to be a reach for a team. I honestly think he's going to go early 20s.
Of all the guys.
And I think that may start a team desperate to be afraid that, that they want that lightning bottle, that Najee Harris, if you will, and try to get that type of production. And with a guy like Spiller and Hall being big backs, they might be able to shoulder a little bit of a bigger of a workload. Then again, how many running backs go in the first round? And I probably sound like a fucking idiot saying it. So it's probably more or less maybe Walker, and the rest go maybe round 2. And then you know how it goes. The train starts running, and all the running backs start running off the board, right?
Right. It's the difficulty that I have, and you can honestly thank the Philadelphia Eagles for this. And really, there's not a whole heck of a lot happening in terms of needy teams at the running back position, at least later in the first round. I think the one team that could take that stab at the position, maybe you could make the argument for 2. The first one that I think would be the first definite opportunity for a running back to go would be pick number. Oh, I lost it and I don't know where they went. Where did you go? Pick number 30. The Miami Dolphins, who have taken the selection of the San Francisco 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
Myles Gaskin and Philip Lindsay and Malcolm Brown and whatever else they tried to make out of the running back position, it's not a sustainable thing. So I think, if anything, that's probably the first place where a running back goes. You could make the argument if James Conner does not re-sign in Arizona. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the other one that really has me.
I think they're going to pay him though, Stephen. I think with the production that he put this year, granted he's been nicked up a couple of times, but same thing with Isaiah. I think that or with Simmons there. I think it's tough. Obviously we learned this year it's hard to get 16 games, 16, 17, how many ever fucking weeks there are, and how many games they play, to get these guys to consistently get out there, because it's a fucking brutal sport, and these dudes they take a pounding, and it's luck of the draw. That's why you want to load up your rosters with plenty of options, and we're going to probably pound that, home all off season when we talk about these rankings, because they're probably going to be similar in a lot. Everywhere you look, I think everyone's rankings are probably going to be relatively, 1 through 12. The names are probably going to be synonymous. There may be a couple guys that are trying to do something for a little bit of clicks or just trying to be different. But, at the same point, there's value in it. 1 through 12. 1 through 15. I think Montgomery right now sits 15. And to me, that's I'm like, wow, there's some solid backs there,
Right, exactly.
But also fuck that. He's top 10, God damn it. And so, hey, Homer, right?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. It's low. It will always be low, especially if they can get competent offensive coaches into Ellis Hall. Argument, conversation, all the above, etc. for another day. However,
hey, Haskins isn't bad out of Michigan. I mean, let's talk about him. And it's a good question by Max here in the chat.
Yeah, there's a couple intriguing names for late running backs overall in this draft class.
Teams,
Dynasty
kids
League
that played
football,
on some big time school, big time conferences that played big time ball.
Right. Really, Hassan Haskins, I think his role in the next level of the game is going to be that short yardage back that gets the goal line carries, that is not necessarily going to be your bell cow per se, but is just going to get those tough yardage for your team. I overall, I want to say in just a standard league, he's relatively low on charts. So he's 38 on Dynasty League football in standard leagues. That would probably push him to a late 4th round rookie pick in super flex leagues. So honestly,
he's my 11th ranked running back out of the rookies this year.
And honestly, in that range, it's not a terrible dart throw for as low as that is. And you take it and hope for the best with players that far down the board. But there are some very intriguing names in addition to Haskins down the running back board as well. Specific bless me.
Bless
wow.
You, sir.
The one name that sticks out in my mind, and everybody really got to see him put his athleticism on the main stage in the last couple games of the year for the Georgia Bulldogs, and that's James Cook.
Yeah,
that guy has Kamara written all over him from when I watch him, and just the elusiveness and how he's able to go out wide, his ball possession skills, and just everything that he can do when he is on the field. And I tell you what, I feel like the average that he's at right now, which is the 10th running back in the class, is low, and there's been talk he's going to get drafted in the 4th, 5th round.
Yeah,
I think that's low. I think somebody would take a risk on him in the 3rd, just given the fact that he was able to show off as much as he was.
Plus the pedigree with his brother too. Having his older brother. It's just like you just see that, right? And he's a guy that I think he could be a reliable back in the NFL. Granted, some may look at him as just a change of pace, but fit is extremely important. But I think, he's a patient runner, and I think there's a chance for him to really, blossom with the right team with some, strengthened offensive line. So Stephen, I do like that call. I think he's definitely a sleeper. You will see somebody take a stab at him early. I definitely agree with you there. He's in my top 10. I mean, I have him 8th in my rankings that I kind of put together for rookies this year for Dynasty. He sits right ahead of, let me see, Kevin Harris from South Carolina, and the kid from BYU there. What's it? I think it's Algier or Algier. But anyway,
Tyler Elgar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
and I never watched much of him because they play so late. But with that being said, it's somebody that doing the research. You saw, he had to put up a pretty solid year. He had a 1,300-yard season in 11 games last year. and he fucking went for 1,600 this year. So
he's another big dude too. 5'11", 220.
Yep.
Like he'll. I mean, there's some big backs in this class. I mean, Brian Robinson with Alabama is pushing 230. Rashad White with Arizona State, 6'2", 210. He's just a tall, lanky dude.
You see the Bears drafting another running back?
Oh man, I think that Cohen is gone. It would not shock me to see them spend a 3rd or a day 3 pick on
Brian
Robinson, running back.
Sign him up.
I wouldn't mind it. I really wouldn't mind it. It's just, man, there's God, if the Bears went and drafted James Cook, I would lose my mind. I would lose my mind.
That doesn't
if he's
spell
sitting there at the beginning of like round 4, like, poof,
makes me nervous about Montgomery though, because they that draft, the draft capital they put on Herbert, and then they go and they get, it's like,
yeah.
Does that mean they're not going to put the money into re-signing and then kill all the rookie cards of the David Montgomery autographs I have and just really hurt my feelings? But so we talk about it being a weak draft, right? And then we're sitting here talking about number 15, and we'd be excited if the Bears drafted him in terms of running backs. Let's slide over to wide receiver and talk about, there were some injured players, that definitely held some value. There might have been one or two that slid a little bit, like Drake London, getting hurt and then deciding to just kind of ride it out and, too cool for school, if you will, and do his own thing. But, the kid from Alabama getting hurt, Jameson Williams, that fucking sucked, man. It broke my heart to see. But again, ACLs these days, I feel that behind modern medicine and the advancements in these surgeries, you're seeing, dude, Adrian Peterson came back in like 6 days after tearing his ACL and rushed for like 200 yards, so I think it's one, speaks to the individual, the ability to, come back, and, Russ Wilson and the 19 days of rehab and all that shit that he did, but I see him being a guy that you'd want to take a stab at, because that potential, of him being at 100% is, he's not number 4 where he sits now, even after blowing out his knee. He should have been 1 or 2. Treylon Burks and Garrett Wilson, I think, are the top 2. But Drake London's right there also. I think Williams is pounding that door to try to get in. And, if he comes back and does well before the draft, he might jump up. What are your thoughts?
I'm right there with you on Williams. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. For as much as he was projected to be, which was a top 15 pick in the draft. I mean, we're talking a serious draft chip for what he's going to be going through here. And, there's still some arguments that he's going to be picked in the late first round. I will say the one guy that I'm intrigued about.
Talk to me, Stephen. Talk to me.
And I saw his name pop up in the chat. I see Sandman going here too. Dotson with Penn State. He's a very shifty slot guy that I think could work wonders to the extent of what we've seen in previous iterations of your reception hogs, your Wes Welker types that just command the ball. They're able to move around and be very shifty to get open. But that's going to be one of those situations where he needs to fit into a certain system, because if he's misutilized, that value goes out the window, and you're talking about a much better NFL player than you are a fantasy player at that point. That's my biggest concern about him. I will say this, though, another guy that I'm a little I'm not entirely sure what to think of him. But he gives me some hope that, a young stash guy, a small school guy, Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama, a big dude, 6'3", 190. But something tells me there's something about just his frame and what he was able to do at South Alabama. There's a lot of smaller school guys that are floating around that 10 to 20 range that could make some surprise here. Romeo Dubes with Nevada, Shakir with Boise State. You have
Justin
Moore
Ross
with Western Michigan. There's people that consider Skye Moore with Western Michigan a top 10 wide receiver this year. And whatever that situation may be. I don't know enough about the guy, but and so I'm not going to, blow smoke out my ass here that I do know enough about this guy, but just a very well put dynamic slot receiver.
He's climbing up the path. He's climbing up the rankings too, because when I was looking at I was putting together the receivers, and I mean, he didn't even crack my top 20 when I first did this, and I've seen him in some other people's lists. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, I see that, and then there's, I see him as a guy you could definitely stash. And I think a guy, I think that's a good option too. Targeting those smaller schools, keep an eye out, do your due diligence, listen to podcasts like One Up, listen to Adam Rank, but listen to the guys, but also listen to yourself. We talked about that, trusting in your gut, do your research, find out who you want to take, and then have that conviction to draft that guy. Or if somebody else does, and you think you might be able to make a play to pick him up through a trade, by all means, fucking fire away. Do it. You can't win if you don't play. And speaking of, you can't win if you don't play, I think George Pinkens, the guy that ultimately had been probably the number one wide receiver the last 2 years. He right up there. I'm not going to say he was wide receiver one in college football, but he was talked about as being, arguably the best wide receiver. Tears his ACL in the spring, misses all of this year. Excuse me, 6'4", big dude, little wiry, but dude, body control, a guy that I think, coming back healthy. I like him as a guy that people may be a little upset about. It goes back to the whole Jameson Williams situation. He's a guy that I think you may be able to grab and even put him on your bench. if it's sleeper app, put him on your taxi squad for the year or whatever. But I think he could blossom into something special year too in the NFL. So he's somebody that I have in my top 10 in wide receivers for this year's class. He almost cracked my top 5 just because I fucking love the potential there. Plus, I'm just a big fan of him the last couple of years, riding the George Pinkens train there. You feel like he's going to make some noise in the NFL, Stephen?
Yeah, I think he has every opportunity to, given just that athleticism that he brings to the table. And I think that might be just kind of the craziest thing about this wide receiver class in general. I mean, you look at Williams, you look at London, you look at Pickens. I mean, there's a lot of injury situations here that make you think, okay, how serious is this? How well can they bounce back? And how well are they going to translate their collegiate game to the NFL? It's a lot of questions. And I'm not sure that the answers are necessarily firm to what we kind of wish they were, but that's what makes this draft class so enticing. And kind of back to the point that I mentioned, like, if the Bears wait until the draft to fill up, I mean, there's gonna be guys here where, given the certain,
we have like 5 picks, but if we get some picks, we may be all right.
You trade down a couple times if the board is deep. Don't know if Ryan Poles is going to be a Ryan Pace and trade everything under the sun that the Bears have their name stamped on. But regardless of that fact, there is this opportunity here to really kind of dive in and take advantage of an unfortunate situation and get guys with some very good value that would be able to come in and help out your team that may not have been there had they played a full year. So yeah, I think that's the most enticing thing about this.
We should do that. We should do a little segment, Stephen. Break down, at some point, not today, obviously, but compile that list. But also go back the last couple of drafts and those guys that did have those injuries and see kind of how that played out over the next couple of years and look to see what that trajectory looks like. Maybe give some insight into some guys this year.
We're just gonna do all our show planning live.
Hey,
I like it. I like it. I do like it.
Hey,
yeah,
there's no script,
absolutely.
right? We just, it's kind of how we do.
we do shoot from the hip, but it works out for us. I think. I think that's how we work.
That's how we work. Not a bad idea, though. We could do a little digging. But David Bell, he's a guy from Purdue. Max likes him. there's a lot of I as much as it's hard not to fall in love with these guys once you start looking at them, and you're like you find your favorites. Purdue had an interesting season. 6'2", 205. Not a bad ball player.
No.
What do you think?
The thing about him, and it kind of follows a line of just Purdue wide receivers in general.
Rashad
is
Bateman
that
2.0.
they put up these stat lines, and you think, wow, he must be really good. And then you go back and you watch the tape, and you're like, okay, he's all that Purdue has. There's nothing there, and they're just going to keep feeding him the ball and hope that he, gets the job done with whatever they can, filter through him in that regard. And I hate saying it, but there's a kind of a similar situation. I believe it was 2 years ago. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was 2 years ago. Bryson Hopkins, who was also at Purdue, who was putting up monster numbers because he was the only real solidified option that offense had. And so you kind of just go from, player to player. And yeah, there's a lot of major stat lines there, but I'm not sold on the fact that it's going to translate, that it's more of just kind of like these hollow numbers at a bigger school that, okay, yeah, he's 6'2", 205. It's a little bit better than some of his predecessors in that regard, but nothing screams to me versus a lot of these other very athletic players like your Dotsons, your Pinkens, if he does return healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of those smaller school guys where you watch him on tape and you think, that's a guy who gets it. That's a guy that can take that game to the next level, and I just do not see it with Bell.
Okay. All right. I can see, like the assessment there. It's, a guy that I see Max thought he could be all right. Looking at these dudes, a guy down on the bottom of the list, Calvin Austin III over at Memphis.
Oh, you're going down the list.
Yeah, but he led the ACC in receiving in 2020, second this year. And he also had almost 350 yards on the ground this year. The dude can fucking flat out run. He was an All-American in track, running the 4x100 or the 4x400. Tough race to run, that sprint around the track one time, Stephen. And he was All-American. The dude's a burner, but he's a little fucker, 5'9", 160. So it's like
it's a Tutu Atwell situation.
But it speaks to your point, you see those numbers and you're like, wow, okay, shit. 10, almost 1,100 yards last year, almost 1,200 yards this year, catching balls too, it's just, and then it's like, all right, you look at him, explosive as hell, but he's little. And it's like Rondell Moore, Elijah Moore. It's those little dudes that they make it? The Tevin Austins, it's like, yeah, they're gadget guys, I guess. But he's a dude that, I think he could end up being. I just look at a Tyreek Hill that came out of nowhere, and just had explosive. I don't say come out of nowhere, but explosive speed. You look for those diamonds, and I just see Calvin Austin as just like this potential big sleeper. I kind of liked what I saw. The dude is just fun to watch. He's just like, he is just like a fucking human. He's like Kyler Murray, but a wide receiver. He had that pro level speed. He just looked different out there compared to the rest of the guys. And so it's just a sleeper, like sleeper, top 20 in my opinion. But, to that point, like we said, there's some wide receivers out there that you can probably get. But hey, if you see him there and you're not sure who to take, Calvin Austin III. Okay, just remember that name.
Okay, all right.
Any tight ends you like?
I haven't done a whole lot of research on that position yet.
Okay.
There's a lot of the talk of I believe Wiedermeyer with Texas A&M, and then Trey McBride.
Yep.
See the Colorado State guy.
Yep. And Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina. I think those are like the top three.
Yeah, I guess there's some enticing opportunities there, but even some of these guys, Charlie Kohler with with Iowa State. Yeah, I don't know. There's
Laporta from Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's necessarily a guy that I would really kind of say like, damn, like look at this dude, kind of similar. Like I was on that Freiermuth train so quick last year, and like I from just the college football that I watched, I'm like, man, no. So I mean, hey, Senior Bowl could change my mind there, but I think from all researchable purposes, I think Trey McBride has kind of entrenched himself as the guy there, but like 286
catches.
Pounds,
yeah.
I mean that's a big dude to play in the NFL, and I'm curious to see how that translates. Again,
he said he's a good blocker.
Guy.
He's cerebral, so he's got the head there. So he's a guy. Like I said, 86 catches, 100, and he had 1,017 receiving yards, but he only scored one touchdown. But he looks like a guy that game may translate to the show. And Wiedermeyer, he's a big dude, 6'5", 255. Looks like a freaking Adonis. But caught 118 passes for 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns in 2 seasons. So he played 35 games, 33 out of 35 games, reliable, durable, what you want to see. But yeah, you're right. McBride definitely took over. I think as that TE1 for this class. And teams are looking for that. Like, we got to inject into our offense. What do we got to do? Oh, let's go get a fucking athletic tight end that we think can be that Kelsey or that, that Cole Kmet, if you will. Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert, somebody, Zach Ertz. I mean, still the tight end, we talked about it this year. It's an important position, and we saw some pretty interesting fantasy production from some guys that we might not necessarily thought we were going to have. So NFL teams are looking for lightning in a bottle. You may look at these top 3 guys
as our fantasy players.
Exactly. And it's kind of weak. I think there's 3, and then everything else is kind of, like you said, Kolar, Laporta, Billingsley from Alabama is a guy to think about, size wise, but it's just not all that tough once you get through that top 3. I don't know, Stephen.
It's like it's about as top heavy as the fantasy tight end position. Yeah. that we've.
Who's your number one prospect? If you had to pick one guy, I know we've been on for an hour, but I'm just curious to know who, if you had to pick your 1.01 of dynasty rookie picks, who would it be?
Man, you're gonna put me on the spot like that.
I figure you're gonna go running back.
I want to. I do want to.
You're gonna go Malik Willis.
You know what? I against my better judgment, I'm not going to go running back. I feel like I should go running back, but I'm damn it. You know what? I know I am going running back because you always draft running backs.
Yes.
If you have the top
Which
pick.
one are you picking?
I learned that mistake during the N'Keal Harry year. I'm going to go Breece Hall, Iowa State. I think, and this may be blasphemous to a lot of Bears fans, but he has the potential right out of the gate to be a lot better than David Montgomery as an all-around player, and it would not shock me if that does end up happening relatively quickly if he falls into the right situation towards the beginning of that second round.
Yeah, he's a special player. I think, I second that motion. He was my number one. And taking a look at this, 2020, 2021, ran over 1,200 yards and had over 20 touchdowns both years. The dude's a beast. We talked about his size already. I think, it wasn't a tough question, Stephen. You did great. You hit the nail right on the head,
I was going to say Treylon Burks because I really like him.
So that was going to be my next question. Number one wide receiver, Treylon Burks goes first in your mind, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a I mean, this is along the lines of that just specimen of a wide receiver like a DK Metcalf and AJ Brown.
Yeah.
Traylon Burks is that next guy where you just look at him and you're like, holy crap, I don't want anything to do with trying to guard this 6'3", 235
He beat up
pound
the
beast.
SEC. Yeah.
He did. And
the SEC. I mean, I have to beat up some NFL teams.
I mean, I'm trying
probably
to,
not, but you know what I mean.
To, I don't know where he's gonna land or where he's projected to land at this point in time. I don't think he's gonna be there. It would shock me if
we're gonna get Pinkens, another Georgia wide receiver that just disappears. You know, into her. No, I'm kidding because I love him. So he's gonna come there and fucking ball out, and we're gonna fucking go with Ryan Poles and Poles we trust, people. Oh,
yes, Ryan Poles. Will maybe we'll see if there is a I don't know, a head coach. Is that possible? That we might have a head coach?
You never within fucking know.
48 hours? Is that possible? I don't know. I'm seeing one mock have Burks going to the Saints at 18. That seems accurate, I'd say. Just given who he is, and I mean, if that means some of these, maybe if you want to call them riskier guys, you don't fall to round 2. Man,
I'm okay with that. You know, we got to take our. Hey, you know, if you like your guy, go get him. You know, and if Poles likes his cat, let's do it, man. You know, let's see. I just, I'm excited. Today was a good day. I just, I like breaking these guys down because, you know, the one position we didn't talk about quarterbacks. And if you want, we can save that for another time if you'd like. Or is there a guy?
That's fine.
You know, or if there's a guy, you know, if there's one guy you like out of quarterbacks, do you like Pickett, Matt Corral, or Malik Willis out of those 3?
Give me Corral. I think he shows the most upside with the arm.
Okay.
I'm just not so. This feels like a Christian Ponder, Jake Locker year, where it's just like there's not a lot there that makes you say, "Oh man, I'm really excited about these quarterbacks." I mean, it's funny you brought up collecting the David Montgomery cards. This might be the rookie class that kills football card collecting because there just is not.
Don't say that, man. Don't say that. You're hurting.
There's not a guy there.
Panini's hearts right now, man.
Well,
don't worry. People be spending $4.50 on hobby boxes. Don't worry about it. Fucking savages. Holy shit! It's unbelievable.
You know, their heart got smashed as soon as Fanatics got that NFL license. So
fucking assholes. This segment's brought to you by Fanatics.
It's just everything is these days at the rate that we're going. But yeah, it's a bizarre class. It's very offensive line, defense heavy, which sucks because I kind of wish the Bears would have an opportunity to pick up a guard to, plug in there because I don't think Daniels is coming back. But again, another conversation for another day.
Another day. Hey, but speaking of another conversation for another day, tomorrow night, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, the TTNL boys, Dr. Phil and Shane Marsaw, are going to be chopping it up with hopefully another announcement tomorrow, maybe a head coach that doesn't leave the building during his interview, and we have something to chat about. But, they went live today and broke it down, which was a great show. And then Phil went on with Rank, like I was saying, on the Sick podcast with Adam Rank. But tomorrow night, 8:30, TTNL, keeping it 100. Shane, Phil, Claudio, Cherie, Caden, Ron G, myself, Steven, Zach Peter, you name it, they'll probably be there somehow, some way.
If I'm on, I know nothing about it.
And you're just there to turn the lights off at the end of the night, buddy.
Exactly.
Fucking the red button. No, I'm kidding. But what were you gonna say? I saw you getting ready to say something.
No, so I was gonna say, if you had to guess right now, who is the coach of the Bears? Because it's probably gonna happen in the next 48 hours.
So Quinn, I'd be happy with, but the Flores relationship with Poles is interesting. The BC connection, but I honestly hope he restarts and just takes this week to really hone it in and find his group and not just take who the Bears interviewed and be like, all right, I'm going to pick from this class. I hope he brings in some guys, and it sounds like he is. But I see Dan Quinn, being the guy that it sounds like would be the guy based on what I'm reading and hearing. I would not be hurt at all by that. I think he's a guy that we could, he's a leader. Pick the right OC, give me Pep Hamilton, which is another, we've talked about that. But who do you think is going to be the head coach?
I tell you, I'm honestly feeling like Jim Caldwell might have it.
Oh,
And
fuck.
it's so okay. Here's the thing. We're gonna go off fantasy tangent here.
It's
and
okay.
Talk Bears. But I'm good with that.
Me too. I'm not complaining.
Just given, and I mentioned this on Twitter earlier today, that over the course of the last couple of years, we saw the way that this team carried itself deteriorate, both off the field and on the field. And Jim Caldwell is a glue to what teams have been. I mean, hell, he had the Detroit Lions over 500 for 3 straight years. That is unheard of.
Yep.
That is unheard of.
People forget that about Jim Caldwell. They definitely do.
Right. And, they got frustrated with him because he didn't win in the playoffs. But at the same time, they fell apart as soon as he left. And you listen to guys like Calvin Johnson, arguably the best wide receiver in NFL history, just with the athleticism that he brought to the table, to hear him sit there and say just how much a guy like Jim Caldwell meant to his career and just how much he brought to the table as a coach. And then just looking at, what he did on the sidelines in the locker room, that I'm going to use a presidential quote here, but, talk softly, but carry a big stick. That's more or less what Jim Caldwell did with going out there, is he brought out the best in his players, and the Bears could use that right now. I see Bob asking the big
67.
question. How old is he? He's older. He's probably going to be a stopgap 4 or 5 years at best. But, if you set this team up with the right coaching staff, you get a guy in there that you could potentially groom to be the next head coach in-house, where you can carry that over. I think that is the best case scenario, but I'm not entirely sure. I do like Dan Quinn. I've heard he said a lot of good things about, what he would do differently this time around. And a lot of people want to bash Dan Quinn for his time with the Falcons, but the GM and the front office screwed up that roster so badly with Matt Ryan's extension in Atlanta that hogtied that team from doing anything along the offensive line, defense, etc.
He's fucked.
I'm intrigued that possibility exists, that he'll be able to get that second chance and understand what to do better the next time around and be able to build up his staff. And, he did that well. As we all know, Kyle Shanahan was the guy in Atlanta, picked him out. I have trust that he can find the correct guys to be the coordinators for that team. So to your extent, I do agree with you, but I have a feeling that Jim Caldwell might be the guy. Brian Flores, that's the one knock I have against him, is he's never gotten the offensive coordinator right, and that scares the hell out of me with Justin Fields.
He had 3 in Miami, but, I think I like to say this, an NFL coach's second time around, I think they have to do something different or they're not going to last. And I think, for Flores's criticism, I would think that he would rely heavily, actually, I don't say it that way because he's a control guy, but I think he would have to do it a little bit differently in an effort to sell himself with the Bears, because we can't afford to make that mistake, and I think that maybe that does exclude him, as much as I do like that connection and the no nonsense approach, that maniacal leader, the guy that, will run through all that Vrabel type of mentality. I would love that as a Bears head coach, but maybe that's not what we need. I'm happy it's not fucking Matt Nagy. Caldwell doesn't excite me, but you bring up a good point. You know, he is like the calming presence, the guy that comes in and, you know, this shit doesn't fly around here anymore. No club dub, no bullshit. We're here to play ball. We're here to win games. And we're here to fucking, you know, reestablish ourselves as one of those franchises that, you know, we're going to fucking kick you in the teeth and we're going to fucking, you know, walk out of here with the dub because that's what the Bears are trying to do.
Right.
You know, but.
And he's a somewhat local guy too. That's the thing that people don't get either. He's from Beloit, Wisconsin, just on the border there of Rockford and Beloit. So, you know, a local guy to the area. So you kind of like that, you know, story with what's going on. And, you know, I've talked with him a few times too, so I'm kind of biased in that regard.
Okay, no, hey, no, I'll say this: like Detroit. So there's you know, Detroit fans that I talked to. They were all disappointed that Caldwell got fired. Like there weren't many that were like that I talked to anyway. That were like, dude, he got fucked. You know, he was a guy that definitely should have got another shot. They didn't, you know, and the Ford family didn't necessarily give him the best opportunity to. You know, they gave him Megatron and they, you know, they had an opportunity and they had some workhorse, you know, they had AP, but, you know, at the same time, it just didn't work out. It's Detroit, you know, I mean, I don't know what they expected. And they had a winner there. They had a chance and they just said, nah, we're going to go in a different direction. And it showed right when he left, they fucking just deteriorated. Now they got the kneecap guy and, you know, and Dan Campbell, you know, so it's like, I don't know.
Hey,
so
he
maybe,
had him playing pretty decent at the end of the year there.
True, but if look, I'll say this: if Poles thinks Caldwell is the guy for this team, and he's gonna give Justin Fields the best chance to fucking improve, become the player that most of us think he can be, hey, sign me up, you know. But the leash for that, I mean, what are we gonna do? A 4-year fucking window again and go down this road? I mean, you know.
I think this is
he's only got 4 years left. And I thought Bob in there is like, I don't want a guy that's only got 4 or 5 years left in the tank. I actually don't disagree with that. You know, somebody that's got that fucking fire that's going to stay up till 5 o'clock in the morning watching film, to be at the 6 o'clock meeting with the running backs to talk about how they fucking suck at blocking and they need to, you know, it's like, I want that fucking guy in the room, you know? So we'll see. I don't know if Caldwell could be that guy. I just, you know, I didn't follow Detroit all that much. And I just, you know, I wouldn't let, you know, I just want to fucking know. We got polls. It's a good start. You know, let's go from there. Man, we got some fucking Russian bots in the fucking chat.
It was, I'm ecstatic with the hire with polls. You know, for a guy that continued to make his way up the Chiefs organization despite going through 3 GMs, and for him to still sit there and build his way up, and for him to be an integral part of the drafts that team has had in turning them into a perennial Super Bowl contender. You know, that says a lot. And there's been a lot of talk around the league that he was arguably the best GM candidate on the circuit this offseason, and the Bears got him. So, you know, for as much grief as we wanted to give Ted and George and Bill and the
hit a homer
clown circus that followed him, they got it right. They got it right.
Yeah.
So
hey, picked him up in his mom jeans and all, and got it done, man. You know, I fucking love that he showed up in jeans, man. You know, I mean, the dude's a regular human being. You know, it's like it's fucking 12 o'clock at night. You know, this guy, fucking Poles is wearing jeans and sneakers. What the fuck do you expect him to wear? For Christ's sakes, what the fuck?
I mean, if you've been to O'Hare Airport, you know it's not the cleanest place in the world either. You probably wouldn't.
Been there, fucking dodging COVID and the whole fucking 9 when you're in there. They neither wear masks either, but whatever. You know, but either way, you know, I love the direction of this franchise. Big day today. More importantly, you know, I'm circling it back to fantasy. There's only 3 games left of the year, you know. So if you're in those playoff blitzes, those fantasies, get your picks right, get your lineup set. Don't forget, it's only one weekend or one day of football this weekend. We got a nor'easter coming up here in New England, so it should be fun, hunkering down here. You know, but I look forward to ball this weekend. But more importantly, Stephen, I look forward to getting back together with you next Tuesday. I say we talk about a little bit of quarterback action, and you know, and as we figure it out throughout the week, we'll get to it next week. But you know, is there anything we left out today?
Oh man, I don't know if there's anything we left out today, but we got to make sure we leave everything for the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So no,
take the mic off away.
There's plenty to go over, and we'll like you mentioned, we'll have some quarterback talk next week to break all that down. We'll do some rookie mock drafts as well as the pre-season or postseason, preseason, off-season, whatever season it is.
The Prios.
Yeah. We're just gonna make up words as we go. I'm good with that too. It all just feels like a blur. But nevertheless, we'll be here to break it all down as we make the run up to free agency as well as the NFL draft and all the fun that comes with it before we dive headfirst into the 2022 season, Prios season. It's a thing. It's
Prios.
But we do thank you for tuning in this evening to One Up Fantasy here on ChiCitySports.com and the Tape Never Lies Network, or if you're listening to the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts the day after. If you aren't subscribed, again, check it out. Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it, you can find it.
We're on it.
One Up Fantasy. So until next Tuesday, for Chris Jackle, I'm Stephen Johnson. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Enjoy Conference Championship Sunday. Hopefully it's just as good as what last weekend was, but nevertheless, we'll be talking some Super Bowl matchup just 1 week from today. So have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next week. Take care, everybody.
Fuck you, Throw Rogan.